Let's get the technology working. I'm going to entertain you with some demos here later, so hence I need to use my own computer. So let's hope the demo gods today are with us. And that my wireless connection doesn't drop. All right. Here we go. So when I was asked to talk today, I had to take a thinker and ask myself, what do I want to talk about? It's always a privilege to be here, and I thought that why don't I do it boldly and take a big topic. I always wanted to give a State of the Nation speech, like the presidents do, so I thought nobody can stop me of doing that, so why don't I go ahead and talk about IT, or State of the IT Nation. It's a positive thing, right? IT is in a great place today. We are here today to learn about how we apply technology in various ways, how we find the right types of user experiences and solutions that tick the heart of our customers, or how we then actually engineer all that cool stuff that makes that happen. So it's never actually been a better time to be in IT than today, right? So we should all be happy and proud of ourselves that we're helping the world move ahead. At the same time, moving ahead is not an easy thing. It's not easy to change. As Sanjay said, there are a lot of counterintuitive things that we tend to repeat, and I like to talk about a culture change that we need to do in IT. So even though there are a lot of positive things, it's impossible for a Finn to have a 45-minute positive speech, so I need to talk about some things that we also need to look at and improve on, and I'll delve into those as I go through the presentation today. But let's start with the big picture. Some of you probably have seen this slide in the past. It's not been updated in a year or two. I think still it holds true. And there are a lot of profound messages in this picture if we consider the time that we live in today. Of course, computing and IT has been around for 60-odd years in some meaningful format by now. So we are a mature art of engineering. But still, new stuff keeps happening all the time. I was listening to another presentation when I was abroad a few months ago, and the presenter said that in the next 20 years, technology will evolve as much as it has evolved in the last 100 years. That's an interesting idea. I tried to do the math, right? We talk about exponential IT and the fact that things double every second year or whatever, and if you do the math, it actually takes much shorter time to do the 100 years than 20 years, right? So maybe 20 years is a pessimistic view. But the point is that there are a lot of new stuff coming. When new stuff comes, it comes much, much faster than in the past, and its uptake is much quicker than in the past. And what is interesting today, if you compare to the history, is that in the past we had very clear eras of things, right? We still talk about them. There was the host-centric mainframe time, and then we moved when computing power was a bottleneck in the back end, and we had PCs and terminals to client-server. And then power just increased and networks came along, and we moved to kind of server-centric architectures, and we call them net-centric architectures. Today, it's not that clear anymore. I'll talk about this a bit later. But today we are in a wonderful situation where there are a lot of new technologies coming all the time. And what is very important to me is the fact that you can start combining these things. It's no longer really around what does, for example, cloud do, or what does AI do. The really interesting question is, what happens when you mix all these ingredients, you shake it around, and it enables all kinds of new things where only our imagination is the boundary. Now, there are a few other things around technology that are very interesting as well, in addition to the kind of evolutionary curve, is the democratization of the underlying technology. If you want to do something today, you can do it. You have access to all that stuff that you need. You can point your browser into some platform. You can download some open source software from the internet, and there's nothing stopping you. If you go back 10 years, that was not the case. It was actually quite difficult to get going because you had to buy stuff, get licenses, get computing. It was slow. So technology has been essentially democratized because we can access it almost for free or for a marginal cost. And it's also democratized because the users of technology are now the main contributing factor to the technology evolution. In the past, the industry was like this. We have these companies who invent technology, they make products, and they sell them to their customers, right? That's how it all started. Now it works the other way around. Companies need stuff, they invent technologies, they give it for free for everybody else to use, and then some companies exist to support that technology base, right? So you can access technology. In addition, there is this interesting thing that we are all aware of all these new technologies at the same time. Now this is a number that I bet nobody knows what it means, and I'm a bit uncertain if it's even the right number, but let me tell me how I got to this number. So I went to the Finnish national news site, yle.fi. I went to the search section, and then I typed in the keyword artificial intelligence, so in Finnish, tekoäly, because I was very interested to find out how many articles or kind of TV shows has there been in Finland around artificial intelligence. And the Yle search engine gave me this number, 11,900. Now, I'm not convinced that the search engine works correctly, but it's a staggering number. I was expecting a bit lower number. There was just last week there was a news around how artificial intelligence helps us predict some childcare stuff. So the fact is that even if that number is completely off, let's say by 10, let's say it's only 1,000, we all get pushed with the messages around new technologies all the time, everywhere we go. It is the new language, this state-owned, controlled entity that should tell us about news. They spend a lot of time talking about new technologies, and they probably have a lot of articles on quantum computing or blockchain. And the interesting thing is that a lot of these articles are not news about today, they're news about the future. We live in an age where we've kind of cannibalized the future in terms of what we talk about. So we talk about quantum computing, there's a session today on it, but how many of you really use it today? Hands up. No one. We all talk about 5G. We all know what it is. Sanjay had a slide on it in terms of the architecture, but does anybody use 5G yet? No? Unless you're in a lab in a telco or work for some of the network manufacturers, you don't have your hands on it. So we are in an interesting situation where technology is so popular, it's in our daily lives, and we talk about the future as it was today, which is great because then people know about it, but it also sets new types of expectations to us. People consume technology before it's mature, and there's a risk in that there is like a, wow, it didn't work. Like we have all this AI, but we only could build this chatbot, but it wasn't really intelligent, or it couldn't handle all the stuff, so let's park it for a while, right? And it also creates a mentality in leadership in organizations that because everybody talks about it, then probably somebody's doing something about it, right? So it's dangerous to talk about the future and capitalize on it, even though you don't do. And we have a lot to learn because this is a big shift. In the past, we always had time to work on new technologies before they became known and popular at scale within the larger communities. So this is an interesting shift that we all need to live with. So, In addition to the democratization, the fast uptake, the awareness, we of course have this lovely, interesting picture that shows a logarithmic scale of some technology costs over time. So the cost of this thing is shrinking, and things get cheaper and cheaper all the time. Now this creates an interesting mix, right? We have new stuff, we get it for cheap, and then when we really need to get the ingredients, the basic hardware, computing, network, whatever elements we need to use, they're also becoming cheap. So there is really no boundary today to explore, use, take advantage of all this new technology. Right? Well, let's discuss that. If you think about the market itself and the business of technology, if you look at predictions of growth in Europe, it's somewhere around 4 to 5% in terms of the overall spend on IT and how it's increasing. So it's in a steady increasing growth. 4 or 5% is not massive. If you look at the Nordics, it's a bit smaller, a bit below 4%, 3.5% actually. And there are areas in IT spend that are actually decreasing. However, those areas that we are here to talk about today, they are increasing much faster, 3 times the market, on average 15%. And some very narrow parts of it that are very, very small today have, of course, stellar 100%, even more growth projections. So the market is clearly divided. IT is not growing that fast, but there are pockets of the new that are growing massively. So what are people doing then with this all ability, this kind of new tech? The growth numbers are there. What's the use case? So first of all, custom is back. When I started in Accenture in prehistoric times, I started working on SAP, I have to admit. But I still did programming, so I learned ABAP, which is actually COBOL, but nobody told me. So I've always been programming when I've been working for Accenture. And I've been watching the kind of counterintuitive patterns of packaged software take over the world over the last 20 years. But no, lo and behold, what we can see is that the 15% of growth is largely driven by custom development today. That is where the massive growth is. If you look at software as a service, it's displacing other types of businesses like classical on-premise packaged software. But custom development, like writing code, building new types of applications, is on the rise. And now we're not only talking about the front end, the interface, the mobile app, the website. We're actually talking about ways to capitalize new business opportunities. This means also differentiated solutions for your industry. Something where you as an organization will do something that your competition is not doing. Hence, there is not a ready off-the-shelf answer for it. So custom is massively on the rise right now. And I'm very happy about it, because I think it's pretty cool to do custom work. Then, of course, from a business perspective, companies need to use all this disruption to their advantage. And we talk about digitalization and digital transformations. So all these differentiation, these custom solutions, these new front ends, this new design, these new user experiences, you want to, in a sense, protect your core, your existing business, but you also want, as an organization today, to rotate to the new and find out what the future ahead is. Most organizations need to evolve. Their offerings can't be stable. Of course, there are companies that are in completely commoditized businesses, and they try to optimize because there are a number of things that we just will need forever as humans. But then, if you're a service provider, if you are in a in a digital online business of some sort. It doesn't matter if it's banking or insurance or marketing. You need to evolve. And the name of the game today is digital transformations. And if you're really at the bleeding edge of things, you might be wondering that, hey, what are these platforms out there? And actually, a platform economy is a much interesting business model, whereas classical organizations who do products and services are out there to push things into the market. If I sell toothbrushes, I market them. They're the best toothbrushes. They might not last that long, but they clean your teeth better than the others, so you buy more of them, and they're a bit more expensive, and you push marketing to get people to buy it. In a platform economy, the roles get reversed. In a platform economy, you get a push effect. Other people will market your product for you, and when they sell their services, that will create volume and revenue for your platform. And this is, of course, the holy grail of most companies today who want to move to a platform with an ecosystem on top of it that helps them fuel their business. But this, again, is not that easy. If you look at the very big companies out there in the world, the top 500, the top 2,000, depends a bit on which survey you look at or which facts you dig up. Here's the Fortune 500. If you go back to the early 1900s, the expected duration for an organization to be in the Fortune 500 was 75 years. And this is a few years old, and now it's probably less than 15 years. There was just an article this week about how General Electric, has come down a lot in valuation, for example. So it's windy at the top, and this is, of course, driven by the evolution in technology. Global communication, globalization, instant access around the world, new technologies that enable new things have been slowly but surely impacting global organizations. And in fact, if you trend this out, this curve, it shows an ever-shrinking life expectancy among the Fortune 500s. Now, this is not, if you then kind of zoom in on, for example, on a country level here, we don't see that trend yet at the same level. Of course, some industries are hit, but not all. And this is the threat of digitalization or disruption that everybody's thinking about. So we have to see how it plays out when we go down to smaller and smaller organizations. So what do you need to do? You need to master the art of those previous 3 transformation things. But if you then look at the facts around these organizations, and you look at the number of companies that have used technology to transform them so that there's a significant profitability impact, new revenue that is profitable, it's only 6% of organizations that have managed to do this transformation today. So even if we have all the technology, even if it's free, even if we kind of logically know that the world is changing, most companies still have a very, very hard time of making a profitable pivot. Most money is still made in the same way as it was made 10 years ago, with the same processes, with largely the same products or services. Now, it's not a black and white world. If this number was 100, I would be very worried. I don't know what the right number is, but what I know is that a lot of companies are trying and not succeeding. So, if you think about then how they are going about this. So, the classical management theory says that you can either grow your revenues by more sales. You either sell more of your existing products and services or you invent new ones, and you grow your top line so your bottom line increases. Or then you have the other mentality, which is, okay, we're not going to be able to grow the top line, so we're just going to focusing on growing the bottom line, which means cost reductions. In today's world, you need to do both at the same time, of course. So you can't do one or other. So suddenly kind of management has become double the hard as in the past. Then there's a few set of companies that are outside of all of this kind of classical economical modeling. Those are the companies whose valuation is only based on the number of customers they have, regardless of what their revenue or profit is. But that's not a group that many companies can aspire to be in. Now, interesting thing is that if you look at this mechanism of valuation today, it's playing havoc, right? With new technologies, companies can play tricks in the marketplace. So if you, for example, look at classical product companies, and they move to the cloud, so they provide as-a-service offerings, there is one clear pattern that happens. They bottom line drops. So their profits decrease massively. The revenue has initially no big change, but the market will heavily reward them in the price of their stock valuation. And it goes up maybe even tenfold. And there are a lot of examples, even here, some in the local market where this has happened. So technology allows us to play with the classical economical models of valuation, which is quite interesting, which again creates some new leadership and management strategies out there, which are not completely classical. So it's good. We need to think out of the box. If you think about why a lot of companies have a hard time transforming, it's because of this Einstein quote. If you have the same crew that created the problem, they will rarely solve the problem. If you have the same type of thinking, then you're going to think in the same way the following day as well, right? And everything will continue as is. So we need to start thinking in different ways. IT now, and the way we apply it, enables us, allows us, makes it possible to think in new ways, even if they are counterintuitive. So let's look at this from a scale. So classical thinking in IT is very much a control idea, a control world. This is a world where all those counterintuitive architectures rule. Let's consolidate all our systems into one, because it's a great idea. Let's budget on a yearly level. Let's separate our infrastructure team from our application development team, because it gives us control and we can potentially source them from different locations or vendors so we can reduce cost. These are classical control elements. And if you apply this kind of thinking, it's going to be very, very hard to transform. On the other end of the spectrum, you have what I coin agility, which is not agility in a simple way like a method. It's your ability to evolve. It's always difficult with your computer in the morning where some patching is going on in the background and it starts to behave differently. There's still a lot of control mentality in how patches get applied to my PC, for example. So agility is important. It allows you to break these control structures. And now the big questions for organizations is to decide where they are on this scale from control to agility in order to be able to transform or not transform in the right way. And this is a new way of thinking. Most companies don't consciously think about this, where they are. The counterintuitive point with this is that these two things are both positive. It's okay to control, to consolidate, to reduce costs, to maybe split things in illogical ways so you can drive down cost. It's also very good to be agile, be able to do new things fast, make decisions quickly, reorganize. So they are all positive things, right? And now, in this new age of ours, we need to decide what the balance of these positive, but in many cases, opposite things is. And to understand that decision-making, let's break out agility a bit. So what do I mean when I talk about agility? Agility to me is a scale all the way from technology to business. And it's actually a loop, because in the past, technology was there to support business. Then it was there to run business. And now technology is actually business. So this is a single scale, it's a continuum of agility. And it's very easy to approach agility with a hammer. You pick a piece of the agility puzzle and you go for it. Now this puzzle has, of course, this continuum has, of course, a lot of things in it. So to pick on a few, let's innovate. Chief digital officers put in place to drive change culture. They are giving a bit of money so they can go and do cool stuff. That's okay, but that alone won't solve the problem. Or let's do some agile stuff. Let's transform our organization into SAFe or some other format of agility where we split maybe the delivery or maybe even the business organization in new ways. That's fine, but alone again, it will not solve your problems. Or let's take everything and move it to the cloud. Let's get rid of the old infrastructure. Let's get agility by being able to have new environments, deploy them faster, which is again good, which is great, but on its own only gives you partial agility. And there are more things, right? This is a continuum. I added a few more things. You can pick your favorite. And we could probably populate this slide if we did an exercise with 100 different points. ZBB, zero-based budgeting, product-based operating models, as-a-service models, Scrum, new technologies like AI, new types of enterprise architecture. There are a lot of things on this continuum of agility, but it needs to be aligned. You need to have an equal measure, in my worldview, of all these things. If you become very agile, but you don't have automated testing or you don't have test environments for all your teams, what's the point? If you go to zero-based budgeting, but you can't make decisions, you're going to throttle investments. If you do product-based operating models, where you put business and IT together, but you don't enable them with modern architectures, or your enterprise architecture doesn't enable this team to operate in its own design environment, that is actually part of some system where we have 57 other teams and they all want to do different things, which means that nothing will happen and there is a testing hell ahead of us. So you need to solve the spectrum of agility, and those companies who succeed in digital transformations, taking advantage of all this cool technology, they master this scale. However, I want to repeat, it's not black and white. For some companies, you don't need a lot of agility necessary. It might be completely fine to do something simpler, right? And the hard question is not to be aware of all these things. The hard question is where in my organization should I need to do these things? And then how can I enable the full continuum of agility and not just pieces of it? This, of course, if you overlay it, means that we're putting business and technology on the same continuum. The bottom part here is techie stuff, typically IT department. The upper stuff here, typically business-driven. But they complement each other. And it's impossible to really do one without doing the other, right? Which when, if you think about how we operate in IT and where the world is going, we're going to see shifts in terms of operating models. I'm not going to drain this slide. On the left-hand side, you have your classical ITIL type of mentality. We talk a lot about multi-speed IT today in terms of how we enable different speeds in the IT organization. And tomorrow, we'll talk about something else. And in fact, this picture is quite misleading because highly likely you will need to operate in all of these at the same time. So if you think about this scale, if you twist this continuum in the middle and you make this XY axis where business is on the bottom and tech is on the Y axis, if you are in any of the kind of chaos areas, if you want to build a business organization that's massively agile, but the underlying architecture is not a good recipe. If you build a massively cool architecture, you do all the latest things, cloud, microservices, you have DevOps, you security enable it, but then there is really no business need. You're just creating legacy faster than ever before. So the art is really to find the balance between these things. Where in my organization am I going to be agile? Where is it fine to not? And this then is really the way to find the point between the scale of control and agility in an organization. Now this process here that I'm showing you on a high level is unfortunately something that doesn't really exist in today's mentality of IT. Our culture in IT does not support this. Our culture in IT is one where we renew ourselves every 10 years or 15 years. Our culture in IT is where it's okay to say that something is old and we need to replace it. But this kind of discussion doesn't exist in our IT culture. And this is something we need to bring into every organization to really, truly, honestly think about what is the right level of agility, what is the right combination we need to achieve from a business and IT perspective. Now, this is not helped by the classical aspects of the IT culture, which is that IT is a servant to the business. So this is a complicated picture. I'm not going to drain it. But think of this as having, well, this doesn't work, 3 lanes. So you have the business lane, you have the IT lane, and then you have, in a sense, a bit of an enterprise architecture lane below here. Most organizations still today think of IT as a technology enabler that selects standards and technology. Should we go to which cloud? Or which language should we program in? Or what is our API gateway? Or how do we do our infrastructure hosting or whatever, right? These are questions that IT need to take care of. When there is a business need, typically in this culture, business decides. They have a need, they have a gap, and they make the selection. So, as an example, let's say you need to improve your pricing. There is some simple order entry, maybe online, and you want to have more dynamic pricing, or then you want to kind of analyze the purchase data and kind of be able to maybe group customers inside of buying groups. So you need to fix pricing. How do you fix pricing? Well, of course, you go out and buy a pricing solution, right? That's how it works. That's the first row. You have a problem, I have a hammer, I go and make a technology selection. And then I come back and say, I want this, two or these, there's these two cool pricing solutions on the market. We need to buy one of them. And then IT goes and makes a roadmap. So we make a process fail. We don't really consider our technical depth or our architecture in terms of agility. So we have a big need in order to make that agility continuum I just spoke about a reality through changing the culture to taking control, saying that, okay, we cannot let people decide that we need a pricing solution. Maybe we don't need a pricing solution at all. Maybe this problem gets solved in a completely different way. Let's talk about it. So we need to change culture. We also need to change how we think of architecture. So in the past, in this simple stack, we've been through the cycles of architecture. We've had various religious war on how to break this layering. So in the initial cycle of architecture, it was all in one stack, more or less. There wasn't even a user interface, really. Then we cut this at some point. We had client-server. Then we have net-centric. What's happening right now is what some people like to call the end of architecture, or I would like to say the complete freedom to own and design architectures. Today's technologies allow us to break this stack in many new ways. So we have, first of all, the complete separation of infrastructure from platform. Infrastructure is becoming a software-driven commodity. You can get it through your command line without really knowing what happens in the server room somewhere in the world. The platform that you build your applications on is available in the open source world as a subscription or from the cloud. We're building application at a higher level of abstraction today than we've done in the past, and we cleanly cut this into two. We are, right now, starting to cut the ties between the logic and the data in our applications. Any classical application that was ever built is there to do one thing, create data, but it's not very good at sharing data. Still, integration, that is sharing of data, is one of the largest costs in any IT organization, and it typically creates a big mess, regardless if you have integration platforms or not. Where we are heading now is that we're going to make data free, and we're going to decouple data from logic over time. So anytime some data is created somewhere, somebody else, if they have the authority, should have access to that event and be aware that, hey, this data changed. This is where practical architecture today is going to evolve the fastest. We've had a lot of stuff happening at the bottom of the stack. This is where all the new cool stuff is going to be. Blockchain, for example, is an example of that, about how do I separate data from logic. That, to me, is the interesting thing about it, that we actually start discussing about persisting data in a distributed manner between organizations without attaching that logic layer to it. Of course, it's only one pattern of that architecture. We will see many, many more, probably much more successful patterns down the road. And of course, we for a while have already separated the UI from the logic in various ways, but we haven't really, honestly, done that many times, because formal API interfaces typically don't sit behind the UI. The UI is many times still very heavily glued into the logic layer, even though we have nicely deployed UI or mobile apps separately, right? So we're going to split this vertically, and we're going to split it horizontally, because all these layers are also decoupling. You don't put all your logic in one basket. We have UI layers where we do various types of UIs. In the logic layer, we have microservices, we have packages. The data is going to live in different data stores. We're going to use different platforms. Your enterprise architecture organization can no longer dictate that we do everything with X. That's not just feasible in this space of evolution. And if you want to reach some level of agility, you need to give freedom to people. And of course, the same goes then with computing, that you're going to source from various areas on demand. And to showcase how this all really could work, I'm now going to dare a demo. So let me refresh this page to see if I'm still live. Apparently I am. Very good. So this is a demo of a banking use case. And over the years, with some of the crew here in the audience, we've concluded that demonstrating technology, or even selling technology, is quite difficult. And what we need to do is drive much more industry-driven, kind of combinatorial demonstrators out in the marketplace. And this is what we've done for the bank. So this is an architecture that demonstrates the agility, demonstrates architecture agility, so one point on this continuum. It also demonstrates the breakup of architecture in terms of layering, where we separate data and logic and UI from each other. And it's done in a very simple, easy to understand way, using a basic banking use case that we all are familiar with and we use continuously. So in this thing, I'm just going to log in, and I'm going to pick the third user. And things seem to work. That's nice. So I've now logged in on 2 windows. Who of you would log into your bank with 2 windows on your PC? Can you raise your hand? There's one bold person in the back. Otherwise, you would not do it. Probably your bank doesn't even allow it if you would try. I would at least not trust that with my bank, not disclaiming which bank that is. So let's do some stuff. Here I can add a transaction. So I'm going to send some money to the first user, send him 10 euros or whatever. It's syncing. So it's communicating with the backend. It's sending events, making sure we separate logic from data. I'll get back to that in a second. But what will happen now when I press the submit button here, if it works? No, it's not working. Let's try it one more time. All right, so now I'm going to submit it. And what happened is that the screen on the other side was updated in asynchronous real time. Now, you could trick this, of course. So you could have the other screen screaming at the back end at regular intervals, asking that, hey, did something happen? Did something happen? Did something happen? Now, that generates a lot of load. That's kind of an illogical architectural pattern. What really happened in this case was that our application here, the left side of the screen, we did a transaction. We were syncing the draft of it to the backend once in a while. Once I submit it, it gets, we call an API. The API will persist that in some way. In this case, it actually went to a blockchain. It will also release the data. So it will push out an event saying that this kind of transaction happened. And then we have people who can listen to that event flow. And through some cool technology that we have, we were able to notify the user interface that, hey, stuff changed in the backend. Here you go. We push the data model into the UI. And the UI, well, it just updates. It's just like you would load the screen. There is no magic on the UI. So we can actually allow for all kinds of cool use cases where we simultaneously work on a few things. So if, for example, let's go and delete our draft. So I'm gonna make a car loan application. I'm gonna ask for 10,000 euros. And if I go here and look, I can see the same car loan. If I click here, I can see the same screen, and I can go and ask for 11,000. I will update the left-hand side. So think about what this could enable, for example, in this demo. I'm not going to go into all the details, but for example, what if you have a call center? What if you have people working together and stuff? You all know this from Google Docs and Microsoft Online stuff, right? Where you can edit at the same time with many things. And that's based on the same kinds of architecture around eventing. How many can do that in your business applications? How many of you can enable that for your customers where they cross application boundaries or work at things at the same time? We can, of course, when we free the data, we can allow for all kinds of new stuff, right? Decoupling is what happens then. If you have an inventory of business events at your disposal, your architecture becomes much more agile. So think about what kind of business events your organization could have, like customer logged in business event, or customer is drafting a loan application, or customer submitted the loan application. Think if you could just see these things and react to them, and then in an agile way add logic to them. Or if you're in some totally other industry, it doesn't matter, right? This applies anywhere. What could that mean? So in this case, we've added some analytics. This is now logically a standalone service, listening to events, flowing in, and reacting. So we have a keyword called bomb. So I'm typing bomb. It's syncing. We have an event listener, a standalone service. In this case, it's a Kafka-based stream, or maybe it's a platform-based stream if it's running in the cloud. And we do a technical thing. We disconnect the user just to show that we could react to an event. But you could do so much more. If it's a real business event, for example, a customer is making an order, you could react to that order in a decoupled way to an event stream instead of having some hard-coded logic in your application that what happens when you make an order. So these are some of the examples and some of the architectures that we're going to go through when the world starts to look like this, which is a completely different world where we are today. Now, time's running out, and I only have 2 slides left, and I want to point out something else. To think differently, you need to have a different type of crew. And this is a data point from Tietoviikko, or TV these days, as they're called. They did a survey. They asked all Finnish IT companies, large organizations, about their diversity metrics. And the result was that diversity in one dimension, which is male versus female, was that 27% of people working in those organizations are female. Now, this is for those organizations that responded to the survey. A lot of companies did not respond to the survey, and you can all probably think why. Now, this is a starting point. At Accenture in Finland, it's in technology, it's around 34%. And we're working hard to increase it. So, and if I look at the audience here, we could do with some more diversity as well, although we do have a bit, which I'm very happy about. But maybe next year we need to make a bigger effort to increase diversity, because with different perspectives, you get new ideas and you make stuff happen. If everybody of the same cloth, they will just not reinforce each other and push new thinking. So diversity is important in various ways. The last slide, the goal line. So to summarize, we have ever-increasing speed of technology evolution. It's a very positive time to live in. Opportunities boundless. However, we need to remove the shackles of the culture we have. We need to find a balancing point between agility and control. And we need to treat agility as a continuum across the whole spectrum from business to technology to succeed. Otherwise, it's probably better to stay in the control space. Architecture is changing. It's giving us new possibilities. Everything is getting decoupled. We can redefine our own architecture, maybe go as far as redefine, create our own language, and the nouns and terms that Sanjay was talking about. And to fuel this, we need more creative thinking. We need new practices. That's why we have designers and technologists here today together. But you also need diversity in other ways. And finally, you need to understand that there is no goal line. Even though this is the last slide of this presentation, this is not the end of today, luckily. So you can go ahead and do other cool stuff and learn more, discuss more, meet interesting people, challenge each other. But the same goes for organizations. We should move from a period of transformation that leads to transformation to a continuous transformation, to a continuous investment. Again, breaking culture, making sure that we spend a bit more every year. CFOs love me when I say this. We spend a bit more every year, so we can spend a bit less once in a while. Thank you very much.